Miss Squeers very sharply. "No, Fanny?" cried her old friend with some archness. "No, Tilda," replied Miss Squeers, shaking her head vehemently. "I can wait." "So can the young man, it seems, Fanny," observed Mrs. Browdie. "They ain't drawed into it by me, Tilda," retorted Miss Squeers. "No," returned her friend, "that's exceedingly true." The sarcastic tone of this reply might have provoked a rather acrimonious retort from Miss Squeers, who, besides being of a constitutionally vicious temper, aggravated just now by travel and recent jolting, was somewhat irritated by old recollections and the failure of her own designs upon Mr. Browdie, and the acrimonious retort might have led to a great many other retorts, which might have led to heaven knows what, if the subject of conversation had not been at that precise moment accidentally changed by Mr. Squeers himself. "What do you think?" said that gentleman. "Who do you suppose we've laid hands on, Wackford and me?" "Pa, not Mr. Miss Squeers was unable to finish the sentence, but Mrs. Browdie did it for her and added, "Nickleby?" "No," said Squeers, "but next door to him, though." "You can't mean Smike?" cried Miss Squeers, clapping her hands. "Yes, I can, though," rejoined her father. "I've got him hard and fast." "What!" exclaimed John Browdie, pushing his way his place. "Got that poor dommed scoundrel? Where?" "Why, in the top back room at my lodging," replied Squeers, "with him on one side and the key on the other." "At thy lodging? Thee's gossest him at thy lodging? Ha, ha! The schoolmeister again all England! Give us the on, man. I'm damned but I must shake thee by the on for that. Got him at thy lodging?" "Yes," replied Squeers, staggering in his chair under the congratulatory blow on the chest which the stout Yorkshireman dealt him. "Thank'ee. Don't do it again. You mean it kindly, I know, but it hurts rather. Yes, there he is. That's not so bad, is it?" "Bad!" replied John Browdie. "It's enough to scare 'em on to hear tell on." "I thought it would surprise you a bit," said Squeers, rubbing his hands. "It was pretty neatly done, and pretty quick too." "How were it?" inquired John, sitting down close to him. "Tell us all about it, mon. Come, quick." Although he could not keep pace with John Browdie's impatience, Mr. Squeers related the lucky chance by which Smike had fallen into his hands as quickly as he could, and, except when he was interrupted by the admiring remarks of his auditors, paused not in the recital until he had brought it to an end. "For fear he should give me the slip by any chance," observed Squeers, when he had finished, looking very cunning, "I've taken 3 outsides for to-morrow morning, for Wackford and him and me, and have arranged to leave the accounts and the new boys to the agent, don't you see? So it's very lucky you come to-day, or you'd have missed us. And as it is, unless you could come and tea with me to-night, we shan't see anything more of you before we go away." "Don't say another word," returned the Yorkshireman, shaking by the hand. "We'd come if it was 20 mile." "No, would you, though?" returned Mr. Squeers, who had not expected quite such a ready acceptance of his invitation, or he would have considered twice before he gave it. John Browdie's only reply was another squeeze of the hand, and an assurance that they would not begin to see London till to-morrow, so that they might be at Mr. Snawley's at 6 o'clock without fail. And after some further conversation, Mr. Squeers and his son departed. During the remainder of the day, Mr. Browdie was in a very odd and excitable state, bursting occasionally into an explosion of laughter, and then taking up his hat and running into the coach-yard to have it out by himself. He was very restless, too, constantly walking in and out, and snapping his fingers, and dancing scraps of uncouth country dances, and, in short, conducting himself in such a very extraordinary manner, that Miss Squeers opined he was going mad, and, begging her dear Tilda not to distress herself, communicated her suspicions in so many words. Mrs. Browdie, however, without discovering any great alarm, observed that she had seen him so once before, and that although he was almost sure to be ill after it, it would not be anything very serious, and therefore he was better left alone. The result proved her to be perfectly correct, for, while they were all sitting in Mr. Snawley's parlour that night, and just as it was beginning to get dusk, John Browdie was taken so ill and seized with such an alarming dizziness in the head that the whole company were thrown into the utmost consternation. His good lady, indeed, was the only person present who retained presence of mind enough to observe that if he were allowed to lie down on Mr. Squeers's bed for an hour or so, and left entirely to himself, he would be sure to recover again almost as quickly as he had been taken ill. Nobody could refuse to try the effect of so reasonable a proposal before sending for a surgeon. Accordingly, John was supported upstairs with great difficulty. Being a monstrous weight, and regularly tumbling down 2 steps every time they hoisted him up 3, and being laid on the bed, was left in charge of his wife, who, after a short interval, reappeared in the parlour with the gratifying intelligence that he had fallen fast asleep. Now the fact was that at that particular moment John Browdie was sitting on the bed with the reddest face ever seen, cramming the corner of the pillow into his mouth to prevent his roaring out loud with laughter. He had no sooner succeeded in suppressing this emotion than he slipped off his shoes, and creeping to the adjoining room where the prisoner was confined, turned the key, which was on the outside, and darting in, covered Smike's mouth with his huge hand before he could utter a sound. "Odds bobs, does thee not know me, man?" whispered the Yorkshireman to the bewildered lad. "Browdie, chap as met thee after the schoolmaster was banged." "Yes, yes," cried Smike. "Oh, help me!" "Help thee?" replied John, stopping his mouth again the instant he had said this much. "Thee didn't need help if thee weren't a silly youngster as ever drew breath. What did he come here for, then?" "He brought me. Oh, he brought me!" cried Smike. "Brought thee?" replied John. "Why didn't he punch his head, or lay theeself down and kick, and squeal out for the police? I've licked a dozen such as him when I was young as thee." "But thee boyest a poor broken down chap," said John sadly, "and God forgive me for bragging o'er one of his weakest creatures." Smike opened his mouth to speak, but John Browdie stopped him. "Stand still," said the Yorkshireman, "and don't speak a morsel, or talk till I tell 'ee." With this caution, John Browdie shook his head significantly, and, drawing a screwdriver from his pocket, took off the box of the lock in a very deliberate and workmanlike manner, and laid it, together with the implement, on the floor. "See thar," said John, "that'll be thy doing. Now come away." Smike looked vacantly at him, as if unable to comprehend his meaning. "I say, coot away," repeated John hastily. "Does thee know where thou livest? Thee dost? Will, are yon thy clothes or schoolmaster's?" "Mine," replied Smike, as the Yorkshireman hurried him to the adjoining room, and pointed out a pair of shoes and a coat which were lying on a chair. "On with 'em," said John, forcing the wrong arm to the wrong sleeve, and winding the tails of the coat round the fugitive's neck. "Now follow me, and when thee gettest outside door, turn to the right, and they won't see thee pass." But he'll hear me shut the door," replied Smike, trembling from head to foot. "Then don't shut it at all," retorted John Browdie. "Dang it, thee bean't afeard of the schoolmaster's taking cold, I hope?" No," said Smike, his teeth chattering in his head. But he brought me back before, and will again. He will indeed." He will," replied John impatiently. "He won't. Look ye, I want to do this neighbourly like, and let them think thee gotten away theeself. But if he comes out o' that parlour whiles they're clearing off, he mun have mercy on his old bones, for I won't. If he finds it out soon after, I'll put thee on a wrong scent, I warrant thee. But if thee keepest a good heart, thee'll be at home before thou knowest thee's gotten off. Come!" Smike, who comprehended just enough of this to know it was intended as encouragement, prepared to follow with tottering steps, when John whispered in his ear, "They'll just tell young master that I've spliced to Tiddy Price, and to be heard on at the Saracen by Lather, and that I bean't jealous of 'un. Dang it, I'm like to boost when I think of that night. God, I think he's seen me now, a powdering away at the thin bread and butter." It was rather a ticklish recollection for John just then, for he was within an ace of breaking out into a loud guffaw. Restraining himself, however, just in time by a great effort, he glided downstairs, hauling Smike behind him, and placing himself close to the parlour door to confront the first person that might come out, signed to him to make off. Having got so far, Smike needed no second bidding. Opening the house door gently, and casting a look of mingled gratitude and terror at his deliverer, he took the direction which had been indicated to him, and sped away like the wind. The Yorkshireman remained on his post for a few minutes, but, finding that there was no pause in the conversation inside, crept back again unheard, and stood listening over the stair-rail for a full hour. Everything remaining perfectly quiet, he got into Mrs. Squeers's bed once more, and drawing the clothes over his head, laughed till he was nearly smothered. If there could only have been somebody by to see how the bedclothes shook, and to see the Yorkshireman's great red face and round head appear above the sheets every now and then